Sometimes when you find yourself duking it out and fighting the hardest battle you've ever found yourself in before in life, you just have to take a moment and take a deep breath and reminisce and think back upon many of the positives and many of those things that run through your mind of times where people have helped you, people have cared for you. And also those crazy thoughts, especially within the true crime arena, that you had when it came to a case. I actually want to intertwine both into one video for you because here recently in my time, as I've been gone now almost a week, battling and getting treatments, it feels like sometimes you take 2 steps backwards and you're waiting for that step forward. You know it's going to come, you just don't know when. And that's where I found myself right now when it comes to the stress upon trying to get healthier and the fight against the ailments that I have. But I haven't given in and I haven't given up. And my mind still runs and still races, not only in regards to true crime, the Idaho 4 case, the Delphi case, and so many others out there. But I have to take a moment and take a step back to my beginning in the YouTube world and reminisce about those, especially one that opened the door and paved the way for me to even have the opportunity to be successful on this platform. And I want to take an opportunity to do that now in this video. We're going to combine it. It's going to be a unique video. Let's get going. I'm ARHayes. This is Convict Thoughts, and when we look at the Idaho 4 case, we've been pounding our fists and pounding our head against the walls and the tables trying to figure out just what happened. It doesn't matter whether you found him guilty or you truly believe with all of your heart that you feel Bryan Kohberger is innocent. You still, within your gut, have to question the evidence, the investigation, what we're seeing before our eyes happening within the justice system, the way the families are acting, even the way the social media and the social platforms are introducing different things about the case. It's all odd. It's strange, and it doesn't sit right. And I've had these very thoughts all the way back to the beginning when I just was managing a Facebook group and trying to just engage in discussion to see if we could find simple little things that made sense. And then I made the decision with the wife's little bit of a push to come onto the YouTube platform, unsure and unconfident of where it may lead or why I would even allow my voice to be heard, because I didn't really truly believe people would listen, especially knowing my past, my characteristics that I had showcased myself for so many years in my life to have lived by. Even though I knew I was changing and I was growing and I was maturing and I was bettering myself each and every day, how would people grasp onto that very concept, considering when we were looking at just simple true crime cases, something like the Idaho 4 case, Bryan Kohberger's been found guilty by so many before he's even been to trial. How would someone like myself be accepted knowing I had already been found guilty at trial? But that's where I got to put just a little bit of 2 cents into why I actually feel as though I'm here today. And it's because of a man who is a content creator himself. Many of you will know him. True Crime Cafe with Dago. Sure. You know, all men, all women, all men and women, all of us combined have a difference of opinions many of times, many of days. It doesn't mean that we don't like each other. It doesn't mean that we're not like brothers or like family or friends. And let me tell you a little story about Dago. He's the very first individual on YouTube that took a chance on me. I don't know if many of you know that. I had never been on a panel. I'd never been live before. I had only put out a handful of very basic, kind of like this videos, but even more basic, even worse quality than what you're seeing right now. My voice was not confident. My voice was still trying to find its way. And Dago took a chance. He invited me on a panel, and I still remember it to this day. My wife and I were driving to the dog park, and I was so excited. My first opportunity. I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what it was going to be like. I'd never been live. I didn't even know if my phone or my headphones would work to do it. Nellie B was going to be a guest with him, and they were discussing the Idaho 4 case and the oddities, and they felt as though bringing me to join them would bring a unique perspective to the discussion on the case. You have to remember, a criminal is not your everyday individual that you invite to associate yourself with, even if they are a past criminal. Many tend to push it away because of the fact, well, you feel as though they've disrespected society by the way that they've acted. The way that I conducted myself was almost like I disrespected my chance in society. But ladies and gentlemen, it literally was a learning lesson for me. I had not grown. I had not matured when many of you had. Sure, I knew how to take care of myself. I knew how to manage my money. I knew how to pay my bills. I knew how to cook my food, and I knew how to live on the streets. That's what I was about. But as a person, I didn't know the everyday friendships or the type of social connections that we're supposed to have as people, because that's not what I had ever managed to be able to have or even want. So it was odd to me to feel so excited to come on to Dago's show, where he not only opened the door for me to speak, but he urged me to do so with confidence. He urged me to do so and speak with the knowledge that I had based on my background, and not be one that shied away from the fact that I was becoming a better person from what I was in the past. I can never thank him enough to this day for what he did for me. It saddens me to see the way Dago has been treated on this platform by others, and I can't change what has happened, but what I can do is tell each and every single one of you, I support Dago, just like he supported me, and he doesn't have the past like I do. Dago's a good man. He's a family man. Dago is a man that cares about this community and every single one that comes to his channel. I don't care what people say or what the rumors are, because he didn't when it came to me either. He supported me. Many of you don't know. Dago behind the scenes urged me to continue to grow and become better, and he was willing to put his own name and his own channel on the line to help me do so. When others chopped me down, Dago picked me up. Dago's voice even showcased his support for me when arguments arose over whether I was affiliated or not. I still to this day appreciate that from him, because he gave me a voice that I can share with you today, that has confidence, that has the knowledge that I'm going to continue to grow with what I'm doing. But he also allowed me to speak in regards to the Idaho 4 case, just like I am now, and bring to you points of why I am so shaky and so distant from believing that this investigation was done correctly. I still watching right here, right now, even while I'm out of the loop of containing or creating content. I'm watching what's happening within the Idaho 4, but I revert back to my initial thought, and it comes back to the house. The very house itself, 1122 King Road, the home where the tragedy happened. I don't know the background history and every single detail, and I don't want to get into it. But from the time the crime was committed and people entered that home to find the deceased bodies and the 2 surviving individuals within that home, I always had the thought, something doesn't add up. Our first sign that nothing adds up is when it started to trickle out that the roommates actually were not all asleep like law enforcement wanted to lead us all to believe. They were lying right off the bat to protect the survivors, which in many instances we can understand the need to protect individuals that survive such a tragic crime as this. But you have to pause for a moment to think. It wasn't just surviving. No, it was much more than that. That got portrayed in the PCA when it gets stated that they much more than survived it. Minimum 1 of them. We don't know about 2. We only know about the 1 that was thrown under the bus in the PCA was awake and witnessed the intruder walking out the door to still not call 911. And we can debate back and forth on the reasons to why and how and where and when. And we've done that. So let's set that aside. We've got to talk about the crime scene. What about this crime scene would make the prosecution feel so confident going into this trial that they have the right individual arrested? Bryan Kohberger. So right now, what we need to do is we need to dissect ourselves away from everything that we've discussed and all the other versions that we've heard. And we have to think crime scene and what will be testified to in this upcoming trial. Because remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a typical time frame set aside for a trial. No. In the discussions upon this, what becomes a little more surprising is the length of time that the defense is stating they need for their portion of this trial. Prosecution, we can understand the amount of witnesses and the experts and everything about that crime scene that's going to be brought to light would take time. It would be a visual display for all of us to see how the blood splatters, the different footprints, the car tracks, everything that could come into play through the prosecution admittance and then trying to display how their evidence could all come together against Bryan Kohberger will take time. And we're going to get back to the prosecution here in 1 second in that sense. But first, let's talk about the defense. Why or how would it potentially take that long to put on a defense for Bryan Kohberger? I've sat in that defense chair. I've sat next to my attorneys. And I know what trials endure for a defense standpoint. I've been through a few myself. So I get the reasoning of why it takes some time. But in this case, from what we're led to believe, what witnesses could Bryan Kohberger potentially be calling to the stand outside of experts? I mean, obviously we know that they're going to counter every expert the state puts on, and they're going to bring their own as well. So it's led to believe, even by the alibi statement by the defense, that much of this is going to be a defense in the cross-examination of the state's experts to discredit evidence. I mean, what potential evidence or witnesses would Bryan Kohberger bring to the stand? Is he going to bring local individuals that knew him, that maybe could place him somewhere other than the crime? Because if that was the case, I think we would already know that. And I think it would already be within an alibi statement that he was with others. We haven't heard that as of yet. I don't believe witnesses will be called to that effect. We know that Bryan Kohberger lived in the area a very short period of time. So I don't think he's going to have character witnesses that could potentially come up and clear him of committing this crime based upon where he was or what he was doing that night. Of course, he's going to have character witnesses beyond the actual innocence phase. But we're talking about innocence phase, which is the trial, which is putting on evidence as to how you did not commit this crime, where you were, what you were doing, and why it wasn't you that did it. Why will it take as long as the defense has asked for? And what that leads me to believe comes back to the house. The house itself. I'm not talking about Kaylee. I'm not talking about Maddie. I'm not talking about Xana. I'm not talking about Ethan. I'm not talking about Dylan. I'm not talking about Bethany. Remove all of them from the house for a moment. We're talking about just the house. There's something within that home that made it so crucial for law enforcement literally to lock that down so knit tight. Because let me tell you, most crime scenes are investigated, they're roped off, they're completely finished investigation, and then they're turned back to the owner. They are not watched over by security for that long period of time. This thing was fenced and watched by 24-hour security. We did not even get to see the victims' bodies removed from the home because they had cordoned the neighborhood off in a widespread range to where even cameras, audio, video, nothing could get close enough to see anything in or out of that area with the victims' bodies. And I know many will come to say there weren't any, or they were done in another place. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking common sense. There was no sight, no cameras, no visual of those bodies leaving that scene. In my due diligence and talking with people that were around the area, they said they cordoned off the area by blocks worth of range and brought in ambulances in the middle of the darkness to remove those bodies. I don't know, I wasn't there. But due diligence and research, this is what has come back to me through many individuals. But there's something in that home because investigators and law enforcement locked down the local community immediately with a threat out in the community and then lifted that very quickly. And they moved forward within their investigation with the silence and the lies at the podium to the public, not even asking the public for help. Even though they pretended to ask for help, they didn't literally ask for help. There was something within that home that was devastating enough, but also evidentiary enough that within the PCA, they did not even have to utilize it. You have to remember a factor of that PCA. For Bryan Kohberger's arrest, they made the statement, and they have stood by it, that they did not need or use the DNA found on the knife sheath as a part of the arrest. And I know that we all have read through that PCA and tore it apart, and I don't think that's all that's there. I'm not even sure if that's all that was actually shown to the judge who issued the arrest warrant. I believe there's something in the dark that we still don't know about that even got Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, provided by the state on the scene of the crime at the very house before Bryan Kohberger was ever extradited back from Pennsylvania to Idaho. She was already there touring the crime scene. Now, at the end of the day, you also have to wonder to yourself, why would Ann Taylor sign off and be completely content with that home being torn down? Not a single peep out of her that she did not think it was a good idea. And this is the defense attorney for Bryan Kohberger. Not a single issue with the crime scene being gone. Prosecution sure didn't have one either. So that should tell you something about that crime scene that's truly mesmerizing and mind-boggling. It wasn't necessary to keep the crime scene? So what was found in that crime scene? What was the writing on the wall? That's just a terminology statement. That's not actually me saying there was writing on the wall, even though maybe there was. I've been around a few crimes that written in the victim's blood on the wall was a very clear statement as to what, why, and how. And maybe that could be something. I've never seen a house emptied in the manner of a crime scene of U-Haul driven by local law enforcement. Normally, the crime scene is turned back over to the ownership and the victims for them to go through their possessions. But no, this home was emptied by law enforcement using U-Hauls prior to an arrest. Prior to an arrest being made. Remember that as well. So when you think about the Idaho 4 crime scene and you take away the people, take that all away, what inside that home, if you really critically think about it, and I would love to see your thoughts and your statements, could they have found in that home, outside of DNA and a footprint, what could potentially have they found in that home that could be utilized within this trial as evidence that would mean so much, that would lock this case down potentially in their minds, to the point that they tore the home down prior to trial? I know they found the sheath. We all know they found the sheath. Could they have found a weapon? Did they find weapons? Was there actually messages within that home left as to why this crime happened? Is there more detail left behind in that home that's going to be showcased in trial? Because we haven't heard leaks other than what was in the PCA, which was really only the knife sheath. And there's got to be something more than that, because I think all of us through common sense would know They couldn't have got the arrest based upon that. That's why they even claim they didn't use it. There's something. It's not video. It's not something outside the home. It's not text messages. This is something in the home. This is just my thoughts. It's my opinion. This is where I keep getting hung up. There is something within that home that brings this crime into a view and a perspective, both for the prosecution and also for the defense, because the defense is going to utilize this as well in their actual presentation for Bryan Kohberger's innocence. You got to remember, they're both going to put on a case. They're both going to put on a case. And it doesn't seem as though the defense is too afraid of anything in or around that home when it comes to putting on their defense either. It's going to be interesting to see what new evidence possibly was turned over. It's going to be very interesting to see the motions for suppression of evidence, because if they're going only after the DNA on the sheath, then we know the case is extremely, extremely light on evidence. There's got to be more. There's got to be something bigger than that sheath. Doesn't mean it ties back to Bryan Kohberger, but it sure comes back to the fact it was big enough that they had to get rid of that house. Love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions. I'm trying to get back into this. I know I've been gone 6 days or so, counting. I got to get back to work. We got the Delphi case coming up for trial. I got things to say about Wade Wilson and his ignorance when it comes to phone calls and the little debate back and forth he's having with Jumpsuit Pablo and others. There's a lot going on. But it's another day in true crime, right? It's good to see all of you. I hope I can get healthy to where I can do this more often. I appreciate everybody that has helped. Those that have donated through the GoFundMe, you've truly helped. We have a major battle still ahead of us. I'm sorry to say, I have not made a step forward yet. I've made a couple backwards. You'll have to forgive me if I'm not here as often as I want to be. You guys have a great night, and we'll talk again soon. ARHayes, Convict Son.